Good evening, friends. On a Sunday evening, instead of enjoying, one wants to learn the nuances which are under the law, and that too by an erudite speaker like Mr. S.R. Somasekhara, a former district judge in Bangalore Rural District, Karnataka, who is also a resourceful person in the academy where the judicial officers are trained. And at the same time, in different colleges, in that pursuit, we also thought that we should make a request to Sir to give the insights on the topic of statements, admissions, confessions, omissions under section 161 and 164 of CRPC. Before we learn the nuances of this special provisions, I can at least say that and admit that once a speaker like Mr. S.R. Somasekhara comes on the platform to give the insights, one has to confess that it can only be an enriching experience. And as a judge, his judgments which were being penned down, as well as the judgments and decrees on the civil and criminal side, were always well received, not only in the society, but in the judicial circles as well. Without taking much time, and that too on a Sunday evening, I would request Sir to take over to an interesting topic, which I'm quite sure that people would actually enjoy that, because these are the finer nuances which one has to learn with the efflux of time. And once it is coming from a person of your immense knowledge and stature, it is on a different tangent itself. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, friends. You are able to hear me?
Yes, sir, perfect.
Good evening, friends. First of all, I must thank Dr. Chatrak for having given me an opportunity to share my experience with you this Sunday evening. The topic for discussion today is statements under section 161 CRPC as also 164, how they can be made use of by the court, how they can be made use of by the defense, how the prosecution can make use of those statements. For those of you who are practicing in the trial court, this section statements under 161 CRPC is your daily bread and butter. You should know how to make use of those statements, of course, strictly in accordance with the provisions of law. For those who are still who have just made an entry to the profession, I need to tell you how the criminal law is set into motion. Criminal litigation enters the court mainly through two fields. One, on a police report. Second, by way of a complaint to the magistrate directly filed under section 200 CRPC. Today, I am not dealing with the procedure under section 200 CRPC because once the complaint is lodged, there is a different procedure. There is nothing like the statement under 161 being recorded unless the complaint is referred to the police for investigation, in which event again it would be a police case. So straight away we deal with a police case, that is when a final report is filed before the court as to what happens. Before that, you should know how the criminal law is set into motion. Criminal law is set into motion on a person lodging what is known as the first information before the police. It is provided by section 154 of the Criminal Procedure Code. There is a difference between first information and first information report, which we usually call as FIR. First information is the information that the police receive for the first time in respect of the commission of a cognizable offense. They are required to reduce it into writing if it is not in writing. If it is already in writing, they will just enter it. The first informant has to put his signature or his thumb mark if he is illiterate. Police have to reduce it if he is not able to write it on his own. Then there is a format prescribed by each state. In that format, that first information is dispatched to the court and that format is called the first information report or the FIR. In other words, the first information is given to the police. The first information report is given by the police to the jurisdictional magistrate. So this distinction between first information and first information report needs to be kept in view. After the first information is lodged, police register a case. Normally they give it a crime number. Supposing today in a particular police station, a first information is received. Yesterday, let us say in that police station, 100 cases have, by yesterday evening, 100 cases have already been registered. Today, the case is registered as crime number 101 of 2020 of that particular police station. After the case is registered, police generally they visit the spot. At the spot, they draw what is known as a spot panchanama or a spot mahajar. If weapons of offense are lying, they will do it. If any traces of evidence are available at the spot, that would be collected. Free mud, mud mixed with blood, mud free of blood would be collected as samples. If anybody has seized the weapon of offense, if he or she produces the weapon, that will also be seized at the time of the spot mahajar. If eyewitnesses to the incident are present at the time of the spot mahajar, police record their statements also. If eyewitnesses are not present at the time of mahajar, during the course of investigation, mostly from the first information, when the police come to know who are all the eyewitnesses, they either summon the witnesses to the police station or they themselves go to the place where the witnesses are located and record their statements. Such statements are called, such statements are recorded under section 161 CRPC. Kindly go to section 161 CRPC. Any police officer making an investigation under this chapter or any police officer not below such rank as the state government may by general or special order prescribe in his behalf, acting on the requisition of such officer, may examine orally any person supposed to be acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case. It is an oral examination which the police will make. Whom are the police required to examine? Person who is supposed to be acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case. It is only after examining the police will come to know whether he really knows the circumstances of the case, the facts of the case. Police, based on the first information or any other credible information that they get at the spot, that so and so is an eyewitness to the incident or he has got some information about the incident, not necessarily an eyewitness, he might have come to know about the incident. In such an event, when once the police form an opinion that so and so is acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case, they may examine that witness. Such person shall be bound to answer truly all questions relating to such case put to him. When it says truly, it doesn't mean that oath is administered. Police cannot administer oath, nor they can take the signature of the witnesses to the statement recorded by them. But the person who makes a statement before the police is bound to give a true account of what he knows of it. Such person shall be bound to answer truly all questions relating to such case put to him by such officer, other than questions, the answers to which would have a tendency to expose him to a criminal charge or to a penalty or forfeiture. The person who makes a statement cannot incriminate himself. That privilege is given to him. Even to the witness, that privilege is available. The police officer may reduce into writing any statement made to him in the course of an examination under this section, and if he does so, he shall make a separate and true record of the statement of each such person whose statement he records. The important thing is the police officer may reduce into writing any statement. A police officer examines one A. If A simply says that he does not know anything about the case, there is no point in police reducing that statement into writing. It is only some information which gives an indication to the police that the person is acquainted with the facts of the case. That alone is sufficient to be recorded. Merely because the person says that he was not aware, that he is not aware of anything, there is no point in recording his statement. Therefore, police have the discretion there. When once they reduce that statement into writing, then they will have to record it individually. There are 3 witnesses. Each witness has to be separately examined and their statements will have to be recorded. And if he does so, he shall make a separate and true record of the statement of each such person whose statement he records, provided that statement made under this section may also be recorded by audio, video, electronic means. This is an amendment introduced by an amendment which came into force on 31/12/2019. So by audio, electronic, video, electronic means also such statements can be recorded by the police. There is a further amendment provided further that the statement of a woman against whom an offence under section 354, 354A, B, C, D, 76, 76A, AB, B, C, D, DA, DB, and 376E or 509 of the Indian Penal Code is alleged to have been committed or attempted shall be recorded by a woman police officer or any woman officer. Therefore, not necessarily a woman police officer. Any woman officer can also record that statement is what is provided by the proviso, by the second proviso to subsection 3 of section 161 CRPC. So 161 only tells that during the course of investigation, the police may examine a person who is supposed to be acquainted with the facts of the case. If they so examine, then they will have to record the statement of each of those witnesses separately. This is all 161 says. Then what is the use of this statement? What is the effect of this statement? All that is contained in section 162. No statement made by any police officer, by any person to a police officer in the course of an investigation under this chapter shall, if reduced to writing. That's why I said every information that is given by a person to the police when the police examine him need not be reduced into writing. If the police find that the information given by that person is of absolutely no consequence, there is no need for him to record it. Only if he chooses to record it, shall, if reduced to writing, be signed by the person. So statements under section 161 CRPC cannot be signed by the person. The police cannot insist him to sign. Nor shall any such statement or any record thereof, whether in a police diary or otherwise, or any part of such statement or record, be used for any purpose, save as hereinafter provided at any inquiry or trial in respect of any offence under investigation at the time when such statement was made. So the statements recorded under section 162 CRPC cannot be made use of in that case at any stage during the inquiry or trial by the police. Then what is the use of this statement? This only enables the police to proceed further in the matter. They get some information from the witnesses they examine, and if it points out towards the complicity of the accused, ultimately a final report can be filed against the accused. If from the statement it turns out that the accused has been wrongly framed, the first information has been wrongly filed and no case is made out, the police file a closure report, which in Karnataka we call as B report. Maybe the same expression is used elsewhere also. B report is a case where the police find no case is made out against the accused. Then such a statement cannot be signed. Then when it can be made use of is stated in the proviso that is important for those who are practicing as defense lawyers. Provided that when any witness is called for the prosecution in such inquiry or trial, whose statement has been reduced into writing as aforesaid, any part of the statement, if duly proved, may be used by the accused and with the permission of the court by the prosecution to contradict such witness in the manner provided by section 145 of the Evidence Act. Therefore, the statement under section 161 CRPC cannot be used for corroboration. What is it that we mean? Let us say charge sheet witness number 2 is one X. He has given a statement before the police. That X is examined during the course of trial by the prosecution as one of the witnesses. He gives an account of what he knows of the state. Let us take him to be an eyewitness. He says that he was present at the scene of occurrence. He saw the accused stabbing the victim, or he saw something else happening. He saw the accused wrongfully confining the victim, wrongfully restraining him, or uttering some filthy words or threatening him. he gives an account of what he saw or what he came to know. Sometimes he may say he was sleeping in the house, he heard a big sound and he came out. When he came out, he found the victim bleeding. And when asked the bleeding, the victim told him that the accused attacked him. Immediately, he shifted him to the hospital. He also saw the accused running away with a dagger, knife, or chopper, or whatever it is. Though he is not an eyewitness to the incident, at least to the extent that he saw the victim bleeding, he took him to the hospital. His evidence would be of some consequence in the court. Therefore, when that Yates, who is examined as a witness before the court, says this is the version given, he gives his version of what he knows, that is the end of the matter. He has to be cross-examined. There is no question of showing this statement in the chief examination. As you do in a civil case, supposing in a civil case, the plaintiff enters the witness box and says that he purchased the property from one Mr. X under a registered document. Well, the document is shown to the plaintiff. Is this the document under which you have purchased the property from Mr. X? Then it is marked. In Karnataka, we mark it as Exhibit P1. That is, it's document number 1 exhibited on behalf of the plaintiff. Elsewhere also, the system may be the same thing. We give a number to it. But in the criminal case, the statement cannot be shown to the witness in the chief examination. Is this the statement that you have given? That is precisely prohibited by Section 162, subsection 1. Then how it can be made use of? When any witness is called for the prosecution in such inquiry or trial, whose statement has been reduced into writing as aforesaid, any part of the statement, if duly proved, may be used by the accused, and with the permission of the court by the prosecution, to contradict such witness in the manner provided by Section 145 of the Evidence Act. So therefore, it takes us to Section 145 of the Evidence Act. I will read 145. A witness may be cross-examined as to previous statements made by him in writing or reduced into writing and relevant to matters in question without such writing being shown to him or being proved. Now the CW2 is in the witness box. Let us say in the chief examination he has stated that in his presence the accused assaulted the victim of the offense. In the statement under Section 161, he has only stated that he was sleeping in the house, he heard a big sound. When he came out, he saw the victim having fallen down, the victim bleeding, and the accused running away from the spot. He has not actually seen the accused stabbing the victim. But before the court, he makes a statement as though he saw it. Then in such an event, the defense counsel will have to ask him, have you given a statement before the police? If he says yes or no, then depending upon the answer that the witness gives, the further cross-examination would proceed. If the witness says that he has not given a statement before the police, the defense counsel cannot just simply say he has not given any statement. He has to proceed. Well, have you stated before the police that that when you came out of the house, you actually saw the accused stabbing the victim? If he says that he said so, then that statement will have to be confronted to him. It has to be shown. No, you have stated before the police that you were sleeping. When you came out, he saw the victim having fallen down and bleeding. Have you stated so? If he says that he has not stated so, then only that portion gets marked in the defense series. It is not, I have not stated before the police that when I came out of the house, I saw the victim having fallen down and bleeding. Before the court, he has stated that he actually saw the accused stabbing. But before the police, he would have stated that he only saw the victim bleeding, having fallen down. Therefore, there is a material contradiction here. So now in a civil case, what happens is when a witness admits a document, that will be marked in the chief examination. Here, there is no question of marking the statement under 161 in the chief examination. Only the first information can be marked. The Mahajar can be marked in the chief examination. There is no question of marking the statements under 162 in the chief examination. The public prosecutor cannot ask, is this the statement that you have given? When the public prosecutor can ask, I will come a little later. Now I am on the defense aspect of it. The defense counsel will have to ask him, have you stated so? It is not that everything stated in the chief examination should be recorded in the statement under 161. Only material portions of what is stated in the evidence, if reflected in the statement under 161, that is sufficient. There is no question of corroborating the statement under 161. The statement under 161 is meant only for contradicting in the manner provided by 145 of the Evidence Act. How that is contradicted? Now, a question has to be asked by the defense counsel. Have you given a statement before the police? Yes. Have you stated like this? Some portion stated in the chief examination will be asked to him. He says that I have stated. Then this has to be read. Have you stated so? If he says that he has stated so, it is a material contradiction. There is no need to mark it at all. On the other hand, if he says that he has not stated so before the police, then also it will be a contradiction. It will be marked saying, I have not stated before the police as per exhibit D so and so, now read over to me. That is how it has to be marked. Now, supposing he admits that he has stated like this, there is no need to mark. That is why the second part of 145 says, but if it is intended to contradict him by the writing, his attention must, before the writing can be proved, be called to those parts of it which are to be used for the purpose of contradicting him. So his attention has to be drawn. All right, you have not given. I will read it like this. You have stated before the police that on that day you were sleeping in the house, you heard a big sound, you came out. When you came out, you found the victim having fallen down and bleeding. Have you stated so before the police? No, I have not stated so before the police. Then that portion gets marked in the cross-examination. So without showing the statement, he can be questioned. If he admits it, well and good. If he does not admit it, then the portion where there is this contradiction will have to be brought to his notice, and that contradiction has to be elicited, and then it has to be marked in the D series. Now, before coming to the decisions on this aspect, this is one thing which defense lawyers should know. Every statement made in the chief examination need not be put to the witness. The practice has been, during the course of chief examination, certain details will have been elicited. Everything stated in the chief examination cannot find a place in the statement under 161. The statement under 161 is recorded by the police, whereas the chief examination is recorded by the court during the course of trial. Obviously, there would be a difference. Only if there is a material difference affecting the core of the prosecution case, that alone needs to be put to the witness and cross-examined. The present trend is, some statement is made. I know CW2. Have you stated before the police? I went there. I had taken a cup of coffee. Have you stated so before the police? This is not the way of cross-examining. Only those things which are very material, where the witness can be said to have given a different statement before the court, that alone needs to be brought to his notice at the time of cross-examination. Then, see, there is one stress that is laid down here. What does it say? No part of such statement or record be used for any purpose at any inquiry or trial in respect of any offense under investigation. Now, the case in which investigation is going on, a trial is going on, let us say is crime number 100 of 2020. In respect of that case, trial is going on. In this case, the statement under 161 cannot be made use of except for the purpose stated by me, that is to contradict the witness. Supposing this statement is put in evidence in some other case, the bar under 161 is not there. Even in a civil case, it can be made use of. I will give an example. Let us think of a partition suit. Now the plaintiff comes to the court saying that the properties are all joint family properties and there is no partition. Let us say, before filing the suit, plaintiff had given a complaint against the other members of the family saying even though there is a partition and at a division in the family, I was given this particular land. My brother, so and so, is interfering with my possession frequently. He is coming near the land and disturbing my possession. There is a complaint given. So, in the complaint, in the statement before the police, he would have stated, another witness would have stated, thus I and the complainant are brothers. We have already divided the properties. In spite of it, so and so is coming. Before the court, he gives a version that there is no partition at all. Therefore, this statement, though recorded in a criminal case, can be confronted in the civil case, or it can be made use of. Even in the chief examination, obtaining a certified copy of the statement under 161 that can be marked in the chief examination itself. This is, but that bar under 161 is over under 62 is only for that particular case. It could be made use of in some other case also. Straight away in this regard, I am drawing your attention to a judgment of the Supreme Court reported in 1981, Volume 2 SCC 493, 1981, Volume 2 SCC 493, Khatri versus State of Bihar, KHATRI, Khatri versus State of Bihar. Its AAR equivalent is AAR 1981 SC 1068. AAR 1981 SC 1068. We have one more decision of the Supreme Court, and that is 1999, Volume 4 SCC 621. 1999, Volume 4 SCC 621. Its AAR equivalent is AAR 1999 Supreme Court 2161. State of Kerala versus Babu. Therefore, in respect of some other case, the statement can certainly be made use of. Now, to whom this statement can be confronted? HC is a witness before the court. HC is in the witness spots. During the course of cross-examination, the statement given by H before the police can be confronted if there is any contradiction. There is no question of confronting X with the statement made by Y. You can't ask X, Y has stated so before the police. You have stated like this before the police. Y has stated before this police. You have stated so before the court. The statement under 161 can be confronted only to the person who has given that statement. It is very clear from the provision itself. Yet we have a judgment at the Supreme Court in this regard. That is 1975, Volume 4 SCC, page 122. 1975, Volume 4 SCC, page 122. Its AAR equivalent is AAR 1975 Supreme Court 1324. AAR 1975 Supreme Court 1324. Mrs. Shakila Khadar versus Naushir Kama. Naushir, Nausher, Kama, Came, Naushir Kama. This is what the Supreme Court had to say in this case. Under Section 162 statement, under Section 162 CRPC, only witness examined on behalf of the prosecution could be confronted by reference to their statements made to the police and not court witnesses or defense witnesses. This is one more important thing. The defense witnesses cannot be confronted with this statement. It is only the prosecution witnesses who can be confronted with this statement. Witnesses examined, only witness examined on behalf of the prosecution could be contradicted by reference to their statements made to the police and not court witnesses or defense witnesses. This is another thing which you will have to bear in mind. Now, this normally a situation arises when the police receive information about the commission of a cognizable offense. In view of Lalita Kumari's case, if the case is not covered by the exceptions mentioned therein, the police are bound to register a crime and submit the first information report to the court. That is what the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court in Lalita Kumari's case has held. Now, what happens is, sometimes over phone, the police receive some information. The information may be cryptic. detailed information may not be available to the police. In such an event, they are not bound to register a crime. What happens during the course of criminal trial is a question is asked in the cross-examination. Before the written first information was given to you, did you receive any information? When the police say that somebody had phoned them and gave some information, during the course of arguments, the lawyer raises an information and contention that the first information which is really in writing, which is already marked, is hit by section 161 CRPC because it is recorded during the course of investigation, and that is not the first information in point of time. The law in this regard is very clear. The police need not register a case on the basis of a very cryptic information. On the other hand, if the phone message is so clear that all details of the crime are made known to the police through phone, then that could be taken as first information. Police will have to immediately record it. Such cases are rare. Normally, it is on the basis of written information the police register a case. Sometimes it happens, particularly in theft cases, immediately a complaint is lodged. A first information is lodged saying there is a theft in my house. These are the articles which were stolen, or roughly some articles might have been stated. Subsequently, after a thorough search, the victim of the crime discovers that some more articles were really stolen. Subsequently, a list may be given to the police saying these are the articles which were stolen, their value is this. The question is whether such a list is barred under section 161 CRPC. Would it amount to a statement recorded under section 161 CRPC? In Karnataka, a division bench of the High Court of Karnataka in State of Karnataka versus Rajan, State of Karnataka versus Rajan, reported in ILR 1994 Karnataka 318, has taken the view that a subsequent list given to the police mentioning the details of the article stolen is not hit by section 161 CRPC. Therefore, I am not very sure whether courts elsewhere have taken a different view. Anyway, the Karnataka High Court has taken such a view in this regard. Now, defense lawyers should know this. Any delay in lodging the first information is to be explained by the prosecution. Prosecution has to explain why there was a delay in lodging the first information. When it comes to statements under section 161 CRPC, many times the police might not have been in a position to record the statement immediately. Today the crime takes place, a case is registered. Tomorrow or day after tomorrow or a week later, the police record the statement of a witness. Now, when the police record the statement of a witness after long delay, then the defense counsel will have to ask in the cross-examination why his statement could not be recorded immediately. If that is not elicited, during the course of arguments, it cannot be contended that the investigating officer did not record the statement of the material witnesses immediately. Therefore, he is a planted witness. Such a contention cannot be raised. Here again, we have a judgment of a division bench for the Honorable High Court of Karnataka. The author of this judgment is Justice Mohan Shantan Gaudar, who is now a Honorable Judge of the Supreme Court. It is reported in ILR 2004 Karnataka 3785. ILR 2004 Karnataka 3785. Yashwant Bhandari versus State of Karnataka. Of course, the legal position is settled, and His Lordship has said this legal position is settled by judgments of the Supreme Court itself. Added to it, it is well settled by a category of judgments of the Apex Court as well as this court that the delay in examining the witnesses during the course of investigation is material only if it is indicative and suggestive of some unfair practice by the investigating agency for the purpose of introducing a got-up witness to falsely support the prosecution case. It is essential that the investigating officer should be asked specifically about the delay and the reasons therefore. Investigating officer will have to be specifically asked. Evidence of a witness does not become untrustworthy merely because he was examined after delay by the investigating officer, particularly when his evidence is found to be trustworthy and reliable and when he withstood searching cross-examination during trial. It is well settled that defective investigation cannot be a basis for acquitting the accused. Therefore, the defense lawyer should know if there is any delay in recording the statement under 161 that has to be put to the IO as to why the investigating officer could not record the statement of the witness immediately. All of you are aware, or at least those who are practicing seriously on the criminal side are aware, of a leading decision of the Supreme Court with regard to the statements under 161 and 162. It is in the celebrated decision Tahsildar Singh versus State of UP. Tahsildar Singh versus State of UP. It is reported in AER 1959 Supreme Court 1012. AER 1959 Supreme Court 1012. In fact, I find that the language of section 162 was slightly different when this judgment was delivered. To me, it appears, taking a cue from the observations made by the Honorable Supreme Court in this judgment, section 162 CRPC is now amended. In the sense, no amended means when the CRPC was amended in the year 1973, an explanation came to be added to section 162. If you have the Criminal Procedure Code with you, kindly go to the explanation to section 162 CRPC. An omission to state a fact or circumstance in the statement referred to in subsection 1 may amount to contradiction if the same appears to be significant and otherwise relevant, having regard to the context in which such omission occurs, and whether any omission amounts to a contradiction in the particular case, in the particular context, shall be a question of fact. For any defense lawyer or for the prosecutor or for a judge working on the criminal side, these omissions, contradictions, and improvements are a very important facet of a criminal trial. I will explain to you what these omission, contradiction, and improvements are. Let me give the same example. Charge sheet witness number 2, Mr. X, when examined during the course of investigation, states before the police that he was sleeping in the house. He heard a big sound and came out. He found the victim having fallen down and bleeding. He took the victim to the hospital. He saw the accused running away from the spot. He does not say before the police that he actually saw the accused stabbing the victim. But before the court, he gives a statement that he was sleeping in the house. He came out. When he came out, he saw the accused actually stabbing the victim. This is a case of an improvement. What he did not say before the police, he has stated before the court. There is an improvement. At the same time, there is an omission. Omission to state a material fact. If he had really seen the accused stabbing the victim, he would have stated so before the police. Therefore, it is a material omission. It is a material omission on his part to state before the police, and an improved version given by him before the court. This omission and improvement, they go together. Now, what does this explanation say? An omission to state a fact or circumstance of the statement referred to in subsection 1 may amount to a contradiction if the same appears to be significant and otherwise relevant, having regard to the context in which such omission occurs. Here it is a significant omission. It is a significant contradiction because before the police, he gives a statement that when he came out, he found the victim bleeding. He did not actually see the accused stabbing, but before the court, he gives a different version. This omission itself may amount to a contradiction, is what the explanation says. This has been explained in very great detail in this Tahsildar Singh's case. My own understanding is this Tahsildar Singh's case is prior to 1973. Taking a cue from some of these observations of the Supreme Court, the CRPC also came to be amended and an explanation came to be appended to section 162 CRPC when it was amended. Now, for the benefit of those practicing on the criminal side, I need to draw your attention to some passages from Tahshildar Singh's case. It is really educative. Section 145 of the Evidence Act is in two parts. The first part enables the accused to cross-examine a witness as to previous statements made by him in writing or reduced to writing without such writing being shown to him. The second part deals with a situation where the cross-examination assumes the shape of contradiction. In other words, both parts deal with cross-examination. The first part with cross-examination other than by way of contradiction, and the second with cross-examination by way of contradiction only. The procedure prescribed is that if it is intended to contradict a witness by the writing, his attention must, before the writing can be proved, be called to those parts of it which are to be proved, which are to be used for the purpose of contradicting. Now, in this by the writing, the proviso to section 162 of the Criminal Procedure Code only enables the accused to make use of such statement to contradict a witness in the manner provided by section 145. It would be doing violence to the language of the proviso if the said statement be allowed to be used for the purpose of cross-examining a witness within the meaning of the first part of 145. No purpose is served. Nor are we impressed by the argument that it would not be possible to invoke the second part of 145 without putting relevant questions under the first part thereof. The difficulty is more imaginary than real. The second part of 145 clearly indicates the simple procedure to be followed. To illustrate, A says in the witness box that B stabbed C. Before the police, he had stated that D stabbed C. His attention can be drawn to that part of the statement made before the police which contradicts his statement in the witness box. If he admits his previous statement, no further proof is necessary. If he does not admit, the practice generally followed is to admit it subject to proof by the police officer. On the other hand, the procedure suggested by the learned counsel that is not necessary. The object of the main section, as the history of its legislation shows and the decided cases indicate, is to impose a general bar against the use of a statement made before the police, and the enacting clause in clear terms says that no statement made by any person to a police officer or any record thereof or any part of such statement or record be used for any purpose. The words are clear and unambiguous. The proviso engrafts an exception on the general prohibition. Now, when it can be said to be proved is the question. Now, there are only two persons connected with the statement. One is the witness who has made the statement, and other is the investigating officer who has recorded the statement. When the witness says that he has not given such a statement, how it can be proved? It can be proved only by questioning the investigating officer. So what is it that the defense lawyers will have to do? After the examination of each witness, they will have to mark out the relevant portions of these contradictions and omissions. And when the investigating officer is in the witness box, he has to be asked, has witness number 2 stated so before you? Has he stated so before you? Or has he not stated so before you? That is how these contradictions will have to be brought on record by questioning the investigating officer when he enters the witness box. There is one other situation where the prosecution makes use of this. You know that under 154 of the Evidence Act, when the witness summoned by the prosecution does not support the prosecution, he may be cross-examined with the permission of the court. Actually, the word hostile witness is not used in section 154. Commonly, it is said cross-examination of one's own witness is the word used, is the expression used in section 154. But we generally say it is a hostile witness. Why he is called a hostile witness? He is hostile to the case of the prosecution. Though as per the police papers, he had seen the incident or he was present at the time of some mahajar, before the court he gives a different version. He supports the accused. He is not supporting the prosecution. Therefore, he is adverse to the prosecution or hostile to the prosecution. Then the practice is, after a few questions are put in the chief examination, if he does not support the prosecution, the public prosecutor seeks the permission of the court to treat him hostile and then cross-examine. It is only after the court permits the public prosecutor to cross-examine, then he will be cross-examined. I'm not very sure whether the public prosecutors have also joined this webinar. I have seen in some places the public prosecutors, after seeking permission of the court to treat the witness hostile, simply make a suggestion. You have given such a statement before the police and sit down. No, that is not the way of cross-examining. The public prosecutor will have to put to the witness, you were present at that time. You actually saw the accused holding the complainant, holding the victim. You saw the accused taking out his dagger. You saw the accused running. You saw the victim bleeding. You took him to the hospital. All these things will have to be suggested. By such effective cross-examination, sometimes what happens is some portions would be admitted. And all of you also know the legal position that the evidence of a hostile witness is not completely effaced from the record. Even the defense lawyers should know it, because even if the witness has turned hostile and there are so many omissions brought into cross-examination, to the extent his evidence is useful, the court can rely upon it. There are good number of judgments of the Supreme Court on the point, and even without those judgments, the provisions of Section 154 of the Evidence Act are themselves clear. Please go to subsection 2 of Section 154 of the Evidence Act. It came to be inserted by way of amendment by Act number 2 of 2006 with effect from 16/4/2016. Nothing in this section shall disentitle the person so permitted under subsection 1 to rely on any part of the evidence of such witness. Therefore, certainly the public prosecutor can rely upon whatever material he has elicited in his cross-examination. So the defense lawyers also should be very careful. With regard to the exact procedure of marking these statements and how these statements can be made use of, we can refer to a decision of a three-judge bench of the Supreme Court reported in AER 2015 Supreme Court 3043. AER 2015 Supreme Court 3043. Its SCC equivalent is 2015 Volume 9 SCC 588. 2015 Volume 9 SCC 588. It is VK Mishra versus State of Uttarakhand. VK Mishra versus State of Uttarakhand. Her Lordship Justice R. Bhanumati has written this judgment. I suggest that all the participants of this webinar will read this judgment. For want of time, I am not reading the material portions. It is Tahsildar Singh's case, that is 1959 Supreme Court, and this judgment. They should be sufficient for us to understand this. Now, this is with regard to the statement under section 161 CRPC. Now, with regard to statement under section 164, you see, we should know the kinds of confessions that can be made by an accused, rather that are made by the accused. One is confession to a police, which is no confession at all in the eye of law. Sections 24 to 26 prohibit any such kind of confession. Confession made to a police officer is totally inadmissible, totally irrelevant. The second is extrajudicial confession. Rather, I will say judicial confession. Judicial confession is one made to a magistrate, recorded by him under section 164 CRPC. Third is extrajudicial confession, that is made to a person other than the magistrate. That is why it is called extrajudicial. Now we are only concerned with the judicial confession made to a magistrate under section 164, and also with regard to the statements given under section 164. Now, Civil Criminal Procedure Code has given a detailed procedure as to how the statement under section 164, confession statement under 164 will have to be recorded. In Karnataka, we have what is known as the Karnataka Criminal Rules of Practice. I believe elsewhere also there may be such rules of practice where the detailed procedure of recording such statement is provided. Mainly, the court, the magistrate who records the statement will have to be satisfied that the witness or the accused is not under police, not in police custody, and he is not under police pressure. It should be a voluntary statement. In fact, he has to make a certificate also. I have explained to him, that is the accused, that he is not bound to make a confession, and that if he does so, Any confession he may make may be used as evidence against him, and I believe that this confession was voluntarily made. It was taken in my presence and hearing. He has to append such a certificate also. He has to be given time immediately after the police bring him. He should not be examined. He has to be taken to judicial custody. At least 24 hours time should be given to him for reflection. This is the law in this regard. Now, well, this confession can also be retracted. Well, what is the effect of a retracted confession? We have got judgments of the Supreme Court. What actually was the motive for retracting is also to be seen. Merely because he says the magistrate would have taken all pains to record the confession, merely because before the court the accused says he was put under pressure by the police, that cannot be accepted. Whether there was really a threat or something, then only if the court is satisfied that there was such a threat, then it would be a case of retracted confession on which the court cannot really rely upon. Now, apart from these confessions under section 164, statements are also recorded under 164 by the police. Now, the police take the witnesses to the magistrate for recording his statement. In law, these statements under 164 are in no way better than the statements under 161. Based only on the statement under 164, the court cannot convict the accused. They have absolutely no evidentiary value. But what is the difference between the statement under 161 and 164? As far as the statements under 164 CRPC are concerned, they are recorded by a magistrate. Then oath is administered. Just as evidence is recorded, the statements under 164 are taken on oath, because there would be two statements on oath, one before the court during the course of trial, and another at the time when the statement is made. If there are two irreconcilable statements, then certainly the witness can be hauled up for perjury. This is the advantage of the statement under 164. These days, under the POCSO Act also, it has been made mandatory to record the statement of the victim before a lady magistrate, and those statements are also recorded. Now, we have some important decisions of the Supreme Court in the matter of these statements. The practice has been to unnecessarily call the magistrate to prove these statements recorded under section 164. Kindly go through section 80 of the Evidence Act. Whenever any document is produced before any court purporting to be a record or memorandum of evidence, or any part of the evidence given by a witness in a judicial proceeding, or before any officer authorized by law to take such evidence, or to be a statement or confession by any prisoner or accused person taken in accordance with law, and purporting to be signed by any judge or magistrate, or by any such officer as aforesaid, the court shall presume that the document is genuine, that any statements as to the circumstances under which it was taken, purported to be made by the person signing it, are true, and that such evidence, statement, or confession was duly taken. There is a presumption attached to the statements under section 164, and therefore the courts have taken the view that there is really no need to summon the magistrate who has recorded the statement under section 164 CRPC. You may, in this, with regard to section 164, refer to some of these important decisions. The 1972 Volume 3 SCC 280, 1972 Volume 3 SCC 280. For want of time, I am not reading out the names of the parties. It takes a good lot of time. I am only giving you the year and the page number. 1972 Volume 3 SCC 280. A statement under section 164 is not substantive evidence. It can be used to corroborate the statement of a witness. Statement under 161 cannot be used for corroboration, but statement under 164 can be used for corroboration. It can be used to contradict a witness also, because it's a previous statement. So just as the accused is, the witness is cross-examined with regard to his previous statement under 162, the statement under 164 can also be used to contradict a witness. This is one important decision. Another decision is 1981 Volume 2 SCC 224. I give the names of the parties of this decision because it is a very popular decision. It is Mari Ganda versus State of Orissa. 1981, Volume 2, SCC 224. We do not accept Sri Jain's submission that the learned magistrate should have been examined as a witness. Section 80 of the Evidence Act makes the examination of the magistrate unnecessary. It authorizes the court to presume that the document is genuine, that any statements as to the circumstances under which it was taken are true, and that such confession was truly taken in accordance with law. Sri Jain submitted that if the magistrate has been examined as a witness, had been examined as a witness, the accused might have been in a position to show by cross-examination that the confession recorded by the magistrate was not voluntary. The magistrate has appended a certificate that he was satisfied that the confession was voluntary. No circumstance has been brought out in the evidence justifying the calling of a magistrate as a witness. We do not think that the circumstances of the case justify any comment on the alleged failure of the prosecution to examine the magistrate as a witness. Now, we have one important decision under Section 164 CRPC, that is in this famous Tartari Shivanna's case. It is from Karnataka, 2014, Volume 8, SCC 913. 2014, Volume 8, SCC 913, State of Karnataka by Nonavinakere Police. The State of Karnataka versus Shivanna alias Tartari Shivanna. The Honorable Supreme Court has said that in future CRPC needs to be amended. The statement under Section 164 itself can be taken as examination in chief. That amendment has not yet come. The Supreme Court has said that such a thing can be done. You may also refer to 2018, Volume 9 SCC, 2018, Volume 9 SCC 614. This is one more decision with regard to statement under 164. What is the effect when the witness resiles from his earlier statement? Though PW2 in his chief examination stuck to his version when he was cross-examined, he resigned from his earlier version and consequently PW2 was treated hostile. When PW2 resigned from his earlier statement, his statement recorded by PW22, the judicial magistrate under 164, may not be of any relevance, nor it can be considered as substantive evidence to base the conviction. You may also refer to 2010, Volume 6 SCC, page 736. 2010. Volume 6 SCC, page 736. We see from the judgments of the courts below that the only material that has been used against the appellant is the statement under Section 164. This court in 1972-3 SCC 280, that is the first statement which I cited, has held that a statement under 164 is not substantive evidence and can be utilized only to corroborate or contradict the witness vis-a-vis the statement made in court. In other words, it can be utilized only as a previous statement and nothing more. We see from the record that Suman Kumari was not produced as a witness as she had since been married in Nepal and her husband had refused to let her return to India for evidence. In this light, her statement under Section 164 cannot be used as evidence. You may refer to 2018, Volume 3 SCC, 2018, Volume 13 SCC 741. It is also necessary that the statements of eyewitnesses are got recorded during investigation itself under 164. In view of the amendment to Section 164 by Act Number 5 of 2009, such statements of witnesses should be got recorded by audio, video, electronic means. Statements of eyewitnesses invariably be recorded under Section 164 of the Criminal Procedure Code as per procedure prescribed thereunder. So such a direction is given by the Supreme Court to the police. Karnataka High Court had also occasion to deal with the evidentiary value of the statement under 164 in 2006 Criminal Law Journal 4813. 2006 Criminal Law Journal 4813. Karnataka High Court has also taken a view that the statement under Section 164 has no evidentiary value. Trial court convicted the accused on the strength of the statement by PW10 recorded under 164. The trial court grossly erred in placing reliance on the statement recorded under 164. Now, at what stage this statement can be, copy of the statement can be furnished to the accused has been recently uh, explained by the Supreme Court in a very recent judgment. The date of the judgment is 8/10/2020. It is just 3 days old. It is Criminal Appeal 659 of 2020. Criminal Appeal 659 of 2020. Names of the parties Miss A, because it is a sexual offense case, the names of the parties are not disclosed. Miss A versus State of Uttar Pradesh. Criminal Appeal 659 of 2020. This is a decision of 3 judges of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has held that only after cognizance is taken, copy of the statement under 164 can be furnished to the accused, not earlier to it. This is all what I wanted to tell. It's already 6:05. I have exceeded the time. If there are any questions, I am prepared to take it.
Yes, sir. And the way you have actually elaborated, it's a path breaking style. This is when the statement given by the witness before police and in chief is largely identical and
Yes.
does not admit of many differences.
Yes.
How would you, as a defense lawyer, bring out the contradictions and demolish the credibility of the witnesses? This is Bangad.
The question is this: when the witness has more or less given a statement before the court in the manner stated before the police, it is extremely difficult to bring out contradictions. You will have to ask him about his presence, who are all present at that time. That is the way you will have to cross-examine. Well, I was myself not a criminal lawyer in the sense I practiced in a mafioso place only for 4 years before I joined judiciary. I was not myself a defense lawyer. I have practiced, I have learned criminal law on the bench. And by and large, I don't find so much of it is better. The question is directed to a defense lawyer because he would be in a better position to tell how the witness will have to be tackled. But my own understanding is this: if the witness has fully supported the statement under 161, it may be a real case for conviction. Because here and there putting a few questions, you are not there at that time. What was the color of the shirt which the accused was wearing? What was the length of the shoes that he was wearing? That may not serve any purpose. You will have to have a specific defense. Either you admit and say that it is a case of self-defense or anything. Otherwise, by merely suggesting that he was not present, who are all the other persons present, that may not serve any purpose.
This is by Praveen Kumar. If the witnesses furnish information by way of letter, enclosing the documents to police and the contents of letter and section 161, CRPC
Yes.
are same. Whether such letter is hit by section 162
it is hit by 161 CRPC. That letter is hit by 161 CRPC because it is given during the course of investigation. By then already the criminal law would have been set into motion.
This is by Ayushi Mishra. If a self-incriminating statement given to a police comes to be corroborated by within evidence, then can it be used as an admissible evidence?
See, self-incriminating statement means the self-incriminating statement given before the police absolutely has no evidentiary value. It is only a statement of confession given before the magistrate and recorded under 164. It has got evidentiary value. Well, the law in this regard is it really does not require corroboration. Confession alone is sufficient, but prudence requires that corroboration should be insisted upon is the law. Corroboration is not a rule of law. Corroboration is only a rule of prudence is what the Supreme Court has stated. But by and large, courts do not just act on the confessional statement of the accused, they look for corroboration.
This is by Raman. After how much time statement of a complainant is necessary to be recorded by the investigating officer under section 161 CRPC?
See, normally the complaint statement is not recorded under 161 because there will be that first information. Supposing if you have to say something more, that statement under 161 would be recorded. It is better that statement is recorded at least within 1 or 2 days after the first information is lodged because there is scope for improvement. If long after the first information is lodged, the further statement of the complainant under 161 is recorded, that gives room for doubt. It is better that the police record it at least within 2 or 3 days. Otherwise, it will be a case where it is likely that some others are implicated.
This is by Sandeep Paramati. In a matrimonial case, parents of the complainant gave 161 statements to the police to the effect that they gave dowry to their son-in-law. Does such statement bring any liability to them? I mean, should they not be made part of the accused persons?
If I am correct, there is a provision under the Dowry Prohibition Act which says that they are not, they cannot be prosecuted. If I am correct, I'm not able to give the exact section in the Dowry Prohibition Act. If I am correct, there is a statement, there is a section which says a statement given by the person that he was compelled to give dowry would not make him liable.
Section 7.
If I have the dowry,
Section 7.
Huh?
So Section 7.
Section 7. Thank you for bringing to my notice the provision.
No, that is by Naveen Kumar. He has posted it. Section 7 of the.
Yes, Section 7.
This is by Nikhil. Can police enter a accused house without recording the departure slash Ravangi in their case diary and police station? Under which section police can take?
Will you kindly repeat the question?
Sir, can police enter the accused house without recording departure slash Ravangi in their case diary and police station? Under which section police can take action? It should be action.
Police certainly can enter the house of the accused, but if there is any urgency, they can make a record that it was an urgent situation, therefore they did not take a search warrant. Otherwise, they are required to take a search warrant. Now, the provisions of Section 100 CRPC, then again 165 CRPC, they all provide for the police to make such a search. There is absolutely no bar.
This is by Rohit Mansukani. In a case of fraud, can statement be given to the CFO, that is serious offences, be used by the ED in case of same transaction but offences under different laws? Can CFO forward the statements to the ED?
Certainly, it can be forwarded. They can be forwarded. If it is of some corroboration, they can certainly make use of it.
Kumar Madhukara Santanana. If a complainant gives a false malicious complaint under section under 354B, she records 164 CRPC statement, which was total in contradiction in the examination chief and cross-examination. Can the innocent accused sue for perjury?
See, the statement before the court is obviously on oath. The complaint before the police is not on oath. For perjury, there must be two irreconcilable statements made on oath.
This is by Praveen. Is it allowed to record multiple 161 CRPC statements of complainant, and in case of multiple statement is recorded, only additional points are recorded on whole statement recorded?
It is the whole statement. There is no point in repeating the same thing. Multiple statements, additional statements can be recorded. If new facts have come into light, simply repeating the same thing will serve no purpose. If new facts have come to light of the particular witness, certainly any number of statements can be recorded. In fact, even after the charge sheet is submitted, further investigation is also permissible.
So this is by Naveen Kumar. The purpose of cross-examination is to find out the holes in the prosecution story or contradict a witness. Then how first part of section 145 CRPC of the Evidence Act is different from the second part of this section?
Yes, I will read section 145, that itself would make it clear. I will read it very slowly. A witness may be cross-examined as to previous statements made by him in writing or reduced into writing. The question is, have you given such a statement before the police? If he says that he has given such a statement before the police, and if what he has stated before the court is completely different, certainly that can be made use of, without such writing being shown to him. But if it is intended to contradict, if he says that he has not given such a statement, then the statement has to put to him, no, you have stated like this. This 145 is not confined to a criminal case. Even in a civil case, that could be done. Even in a civil case, let us take it this way. There is a partition suit. In a partition suit, the plaintiff comes to the court and says that he has filed this suit for partition. There is no partition at all. Supposing the plaintiff has sold the property to one X. In the sale deed, he has stated that a partition between me and the other family members, I got this property and I am selling this to you. It's a previous statement. Now, when the plaintiff is in the witness box, the defense lawyer can ask him, have you sold any property to Mr. X? Have you stated in the sale deed? Supposing he says, yes, I have stated so in the sale deed, no problem. If he denies, all right, I am now reading out to you the sale deed executed by you in favor of Mr. X, where you have stated that there is already a partition. This is the purpose of 145. Though normally we are making use of it in the criminal case, certainly even in a civil case, 145 could be made use of. So 140 first part would come into play when he admits having given such a statement. When he says that he has not given such a statement, then only it needs to be confronted. Because if he says that he has given such a statement, that is the end of the matter.
So, Praveen, what is the correct procedure for marking of contradiction? Whether it is to be marked through witness or it is to be marked after it is legally proved by the investigating officer?
It has to be marked through the, first it has to be marked through the witness, and thereafter it has to be put to the investigating officer. That first you will have to put it to the witness, get it marked, then again put it to the investigating officer and ask him whether he has, whether the witness has given such a statement or not. In fact, I would suggest you to read that Justice Bhanumati's judgment, which I told you, reported in AER 2015 Supreme Court. I will just, since I didn't have time, I did not read the relevant portion of it. I will read it now. V.K. Mishra. It's a very beautiful judgment. The court cannot suo moto make use of statements to police not proved and ask questions with reference to them which are inconsistent and with the testimony of the witness in the court. The words in section 162, if duly proved, clearly show that the record of the statement of witnesses cannot be admitted in evidence straight away, nor can be looked into, but they must be duly proved for the purpose of contradiction by eliciting admission from the witness during cross-examination and also during the cross-examination of the investigating officer. The statement before the investigating officer can be used for contradiction, but only after strict compliance with 145 of the Evidence Act, that is by drawing attention to the parts intended for contradiction. Under 145, when it is intended to contradict the witness by his previous statement reduced into writing, the attention of such witness must be called to those parts of it which are to be used for the purpose of contradicting him before the writing can be used. While recording the deposition of a witness, it becomes the duty of the trial court to ensure that the part of the police statement with which it is intended to contradict the witness is brought to the notice of the witness in his cross-examination. The attention of the witness is drawn to that part, and this must reflect in his cross-examination by reproducing it. If the witness admits the part intended to contradict him, it stands proved, and there is no need to further proof of contradiction, and it will be read while appreciating the evidence. If he denies having made that part of the statement, his attention must be drawn to that statement and must be mentioned in the deposition. By this process, the contradiction is merely brought on record, but it is yet to be proved. Thereafter, when the investigating officer is examined in the court, his attention should be drawn to the passage marked for the purpose of contradiction. It will then be proved in the deposition of the investigating officer, who again by referring to the police statement will depose about the witness having made that statement. The process again involves referring to the police statement and telling out that part with which the matter of the statement was intended to be contradicted. If the witness was not confronted with that part of the statement with which the defense wanted to contradict him, then the court cannot suo moto make use of statements to police not proved in compliance with 145 of the Evidence Act, that is by drawing the attention of the parties intended for contradiction. Therefore, you must first ask the witness, get it marked, then put it to the investigating officer. In fact, I suggest that all the juniors will read this judgment of Honorable Justice Bhanumati in this V.K. Mishra's case. Citation I have already given, 2015 9 SCC 588. more particularly paras 15 to 20.
Yes, sir. So the last question we will be taking, this is by Rohit. What if the section 161 statement is fudged by the police, where something is written but denied by witness? At what stage the statement is to be furnished to witness/complainant?
That has to be furnished. That has to be furnished only at the time of, as far as the accused is concerned, only when the cognizance is taken and charge sheet is filed to the court and cognizance is taken. As far as the witness is concerned, I think there is no bar for giving the statement to the witness immediately after it is recorded. Though the CRPC doesn't say so, I don't think that there is any bar for giving the statement to the witness at that stage itself.
Yes, sir.
As far as the accused is concerned, only after the final report is filed.
Right, sir. So, since Naveen has been kind enough to post a lot of judgments, I will take the last question from his. So, what is the order for production of witnesses in criminal matters? 138 Evidence Act doesn't contain any procedure.
It really doesn't contain any procedure, but the best practice is to examine the complainant in the case under 138, because if the complainant discloses what the case is, it will be better for the court to understand, better for the cross-examining counsel also. In other police cases also, it is better that the victim of the offense is first examined. Sometimes the victim of the offense may be the complainant himself or herself, then there is no problem. If for some reason the victim of the offense is not the complainant, the better practice is to examine the victim first so that a clear picture would emerge.
So, since he is my namesake, I am taking his question, though I said last question.
Yes, please.
Ask, is it allowed to record multiple 161 statements of the complainant, and in case of multiple statements having been recorded, only additional points are recorded on the whole statement is recorded. As there is improvement in dates, as complainant came to know about the dates in other civil cases. What is your take on that?
I did not follow the question.
So he says that one statement has been recorded, and subsequently during the proceedings before the civil court, there are certain statements which have come to his knowledge. Can he make another multiple statement on that effect by adding additional points?
During the pendency of a civil case, some information is disclosed.
Yes.
Therefore, he again goes to the police and makes a further statement. There is absolutely no bar for making a further statement, because even after submission of the final report, further investigation is permissible. But ultimately, when it comes to appreciation of evidence, well, why he did not make that statement earlier, why he waited till the civil proceedings took place, requires some explanation. Is it only a patch-up work, or really he did not know? It is a matter for appreciation of evidence. But there is no bar for giving such a statement even after the charge sheet is filed.
Yes. So thank you on behalf of all the participants who are watching us live on the Facebook as well as on this platform for giving such an insightful session. The in-depth analysis and the in-depth manner in which you have given the insights that will go in the long way, not only to the young lawyers, but the lawyers who have good practice, because as they say in any profession, the more you practice, the more you learn.
Yes.
So that's the best way to move forward. I remember Justice Singhvi saying that the best way to move forward in the life is that you have to keep on climbing the stairs. And if you stop believing climbing the stairs, then the only way is to come down. So therefore, any professional who has to learn his nuances, the best way is to join webinars and have insights from people like you. And it is only during these testing times we had learned that a person sitting way down in Bangalore could connect all the participants pan-India or pan-world, I can say. So that's the beauty. They say every adversity also brings some prosperity, etc. And tomorrow, in a pursuit for the webinars, tomorrow we will have a webinar on the March of Rent Laws by Mr. P.V. Balaji, an established lawyer in Madras who has written various books, including he's presently writing a book on the rent law pan-India, what is the broader perspective. Therefore, we thought that once he's writing a book, we should request him. And he has already given one webinar on our session. It's doing extremely well on the YouTube as well. And be that as it may, even on different platforms down south, that is in Madras, his various webinars on different issues are doing very well, including that of rent law. But There it was on limited aspect. Here you will be touching the pan-India rent law, how there is a march of that. So do stay connected with us. And thank you, sir, the way you have given us the insights. We are so grateful for acceding to our request and getting connected and helping us to enjoy the Sunday with knowledge from your end. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, sir. Namaskar. Thank you.